Welcome to Attachment Matters, a series of conversations between two moms who love to nerd out on the subject of attachment. We'll dive into what it is, what it isn't, what it relates to, what it can mean for parenting, and how it can help us explain the current state of things.
As mothers, both of us found ourselves entangled in the world of gender ideology, following very different routes to get here. What we share in common is how the attachment framework has helped us to untangle these threads and better understand and fulfill our responsibilities as mothers in both the beauty and the challenge of these times.
In this rather long episode, Rose and I go to some delicate and likely challenging places. We revisit the importance of how our narratives determine what we see, which in turn shapes what we do and ultimately steers our lives. We tackle the tricky topic of disrespect and different ways to interpret that behavior so we, as parents, can stay grounded in alpha vibes and respond productively. We caution parents to be mindful of how they use their attachment power, and I go into some detail about the radical approach I took with my own trans-identified daughter and share my rationale for adopting this seemingly counterintuitive way. We end acknowledging how much of our lives we spend in our futile attempts to outrun the universal human experience of heartache.
All right. So, what we talked about for this next episode is sort of continuing to talk about alpha. And I know that, we have some reflections on after having recorded our last episode, some things we might want to come back to, some things that might sound like review in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
But one place that we haven't necessarily addressed yet is this question that of what to do when we perceive that a child is being disrespectful to us in the role of whether it's a younger child, an adolescent, or even an adult child, you know
Mm-hmm.
what what to do, how to see this, how to
Mm-hmm.
understand it, and then what do you do um, as a result of what you see
Right.
and what you can come
Yes.
to understand. So,
Yes.
so that's kind of the place we wanted to start today.
Which in and of itself is quite a rich topic, I think,
Yeah,
with lots of nuance.
for
So,
sure. For sure. For
yeah, how do we
sure.
tackle it? Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering if you wanted to kind of, if there's any stories that jump out to you or anything that you hear often from parents around this, the way, whether it's adolescents or adult children, the way that parents perceive or experience what we would like define as something that's disrespectful, or does anything jump out to you?
Um, there's so much in that question.
Yeah.
How parents perceive, I love the way you say that,
Mm,
how they
mm,
perceive the behavior, because
mm.
this goes right back to to the title of the last episode.
Yeah,
What we see determines what we do.
exactly.
And and I think the word respect is loaded. I think the
Oh,
word
it's so
disrespect
loaded.
is loaded.
So loaded.
And I remember what it was. It was that expectation, or
Mm,
you called it, we're so role oriented. Is that the word you used? Or role?
yeah.
What did, how did you word it? It was before we,
Yeah. So, I'm like, full transparency. I was re-listening to the Wisdom of Dependence, the second half, because
mm-hmm,
in our last episode, I
mm-hmm,
only, I had just listened to the first half and it was sort of fresh in my mind. So I'm like, I'm going to listen to the second half. So at the very end of that, keynote address, the slide that Dr. Neufeld sort of ends it all on, brings it all together with, is basically saying that the unrecognized tragedy of our times is that our dependents are not depending on us.
yes.
And then he breaks that down a little bit. And then the very last thing that goes on that slide is that and I will quote, the more role based our caregiving becomes, the less care we take to cultivate the attachments through which our care can be delivered. So there's a lot there. But I think what I had said right before we started recording is that so our society has become more and more role based.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And it's not that it wasn't in the past, it's that in the past, there was also culture, there were also
Yes.
traditions that facilitated the attachment
Yes.
to allow for that delivery of care to flow out of those roles. But as culture has changed and
Yeah.
some of those traditional um foundations have changed, we still cling on to the role. So because I am your mother,
Yes.
you should dot dot
Yes.
dot dot dot.
Yes. There's an
We've
expectation
Yes,
of
that this
behavior.
role demands certain
Hmm.
behaviors from our
Hmm.
children toward us.
And somehow they just should know this
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Yes. Okay.
But we've lost kind of the wisdom and the
Hmm.
cultural support for
Hmm. Hmm.
actually
Hmm.
cultivating the
Hmm.
relationships that allow for that role to function as it should, and our children
Yes.
to give their hearts to us and trust us and therefore respect us. And
Right. Yes. And that was something else we touched on before recording is that you can't demand respect.
yeah,
It doesn't work that way. Respect is a felt sense. I would say, that it's the vibe,
hmm hmm
that you are naturally inclined or moved to respect somebody.
yeah, yeah. No, I think it's an
And
outcome
you
of
can't coerce
attachment.
respect, right? It's an outcome of
Right.
attachment.
You
Okay.
can certainly coerce like fear, or
Yes.
like deference, or those things are.
Hmm.
It's not that it
Hmm.
can't happen that way, but
But it's not really
there's a
respect.
downside. Yeah. What'd you say?
I would say that's also not really respect.
Mm, mm,
That's like
mm,
you said, that's fear.
mm-hmm,
And do we
mm-hmm.
equate that deference, fear-based deference, to
Mm-hmm.
respect? To me, that those are not the same
Right.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So how would we speak to like disrespect as we kind of, and we'll keep talking about what we've already laid out there, but like I know it's
Okay.
yeah, go ahead. Hmm.
Well, I'm thinking of how we have talked about cultivating good intentions, where you are
Yes.
working the
Yes.
relationship and the relationship is working,
Mm-hmm.
right? You work the
Mm-hmm.
relationship so that it works for you and
Mm-hmm.
cultivates the good intentions. And when parents are not experiencing those good intentions from their child,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
instead are being treated coldly,
Yeah.
or sassy, or
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
with contempt,
Yeah.
I think is what
Yeah.
parents can often experience from their kids.
Yeah.
Um, and that's very difficult to tolerate and to know what to
Yes.
do with in a way that generates genuine respect,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I will share just as an example, and I don't know if this will resonate with you and anything that you've heard in general, from supporting parents, but I have a friend who, told me about a family with an adolescent who trans-identified adolescent, um, who, you know, the families was getting family therapy and just right there, in the therapy room, this young, female, trans-identified female girl was saying, just calling her mother a stupid idiot,
mm,
just all kinds of swear words, just,
hmm.
the child and the child was, you know, basically steering the ship, and, just insulting, attacking, just with no thought that it wouldn't be the right thing to do or no,
Mm-hmm.
And just what do you, the friend was saying to me, like, what, like, as a therapist, like, how can I even address this dynamic?
Mm.
It is so out of control, and something is so off in this
Mm-hmm.
relationship, And
Mm-hmm.
so that just,
Mm-hmm.
when we talking about respect and disrespect, that was kind of one of the scenarios that kind of popped into my mind immediately that I had been
Yes.
thinking about recently.
Yes. I would say that
Um,
is a pretty common experience.
yeah,
Yes. That
yeah,
type of behavior. Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah,
And parents at a loss.
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to recognize the cultural influences here,
Hmm.
that
Oh, yeah.
what is moving the child to behave this way,
Right, right,
and I think it
right.
is a lot of the narratives about who parents are, um, and just the generation, Gen X, boomers, right? And
Mm,
what these younger people, right, Gen Z, think of us,
hmm, hmm,
the story
hmm.
about who we are in the
Yeah,
world, which
yeah,
does not uh, foster respect.
right.
you know,
Yeah, totally,
our
totally.
our place in the world has been devalued.
Yeah.
We just they don't see us as worthy
Hmm, hmm,
of
hmm.
respect. And so I think that that's a huge factor in this, that
Yeah, for
is,
sure.
and because there's not that natural sense of dependence, like you said, the world and the economy are structured in such a way that they don't experience that sense of dependence,
Yeah,
and so that makes it easier, I
right.
think, to also operate from that energy of disrespect. Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it just connects right back to this, again, this idea of our society becoming more role-based
Mhm.
versus having that wisdom of how to cultivate that alpha, the provider and the seeker, the alpha and the dependent, how we actually have to cultivate that in relationship, you know,
Yeah.
vertically, not horizontally with our children, but
Yes.
we are, that we are above and they are below, from a young age. And I think we have just totally turned that upside down. And I think, it's not our fault per se, because it is so, has just taken over the culture. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is I think that same culture we're talking about that is influencing our kids, has also influenced us,
Yes.
and give it, started our parenting off from a place of insecurity, from a
Yes.
place of seeking.
Yes.
I don't have the knowledge, I need to seek it out from someone else. So that lack of confidence that maybe past generations had, I think many of us didn't start off with. I think we started
Mhm.
off with a
Mhm.
lack of confidence.
Mhm.
Overall, maybe not everyone, but I think those cultural winds were blowing on us
Yes. Well, and I
as
think some
well,
of that was a drive to do things differently than our parents did,
Totally.
you
Totally.
know.
Yep.
Um,
It's not that it didn't come from a good place
right.
or a well-intended place.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it was a pendulum swing potentially away
Hmm,
from authoritarianism,
hmm, hmm, hmm.
which I don't know whether that cultivated good intentions either. I don't
Right.
think that that did. Yeah,
Right.
a more
Right.
coercive, controlling parenting style. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. It's
hmm
all so fascinating.
hmm hmm
Um, but I think if we're only left, maybe what I was kind of going with that is like, if we're only left with the role, because I am your mother,
hmm
this is how it should be, but we haven't, necessarily, our kids have been maybe pushed into peer orientation, whether not maybe not actively by us, but because of the cultural forces at play from a
Mm-hmm.
very young age, attaching to their peers, orienting to their peers as their primary compass point for life, or they're seeking those attachment needs to be met more by their peers than from the adults in their lives. There's just so much that, like you're saying, that culturally, whether we went just with the flow of the river or we actively participated in because we didn't know better, you
Mm-hmm.
know, there's so many different ways that this can play out. As loving and as nurturing and as providing as we can may be, if those attachments are not seeking from us, we are just left with the role. And when something is not working,
Mm-hmm.
you know, boy, are we going to get frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
Boy,
Mm-hmm.
are we going to get frustrated. And honestly, if something is not working, our kids are also going to be
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of frustration
Yes.
because it's not going to be working for them either.
Right.
And I think that, that does create for kind of this dynamic of aggression, of potential attacking energy vis-a-vis us,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
it's not working.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
Mm-hmm.
working. And yeah, and I think part of all of that mix can also, in some ways result in these kids taking on the alpha role, if they are, you know, if they're not getting their dependency needs met
Yeah.
from us
Yeah.
or other adults in their lives
Yes.
that can provide that sense of safety and security, like we've got this. We're not, there's no wounding in that relationship or less wounding in that relationship, hopefully. Um, the kids can be more vulnerable. Their hearts maybe stay soft. Whereas when they're in those seeking modes from peers who are also immature,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Neufeld talks about this all the time. Like that's where so much more wounding can happen. The rejections, the pettiness, or even worse, when we hear about everything that's happening, I don't know how much this is happening in the communities you're involved with, but I know from a lot of parents of middle schoolers in my area, there is all kinds of like sexually vulnerable photographs being sent
Mm-hmm.
from girls to boys and being threatened to be shared with others. There's just so much
Mm-hmm.
exposure, so much wounding. And if
Mm-hmm.
if our if our kids are not depending on us, they're depending on those relationships that are wounding them constantly,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
and and they can be very defended. They can be pushed into that alpha position, which intrinsically, if it's a child, is a position of alarm
Mm-hmm.
because they don't have security. They don't have safety in depending on that adult. And that can really play out again in some of these bossy, prescriptive, demanding, also that sort of quote unquote, what we would call very disrespectful, or I've used the word odious before,
Yeah.
behavior towards us that is so off putting, that is so, um, antithetical to what we would want from our child in the way they treat us, you know, that it can
Yes.
cause us to be thrown off in how we respond and how we
Mm-hmm.
can work that relationship, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it can
Yeah,
kind
I
of
do
turn
want
into a
to.
vicious cycle.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
So
Yeah.
I just
I
said a
just.
lot there. Sorry, I'm going to stop talking now.
Oh, it's okay. I'm wanting to
Yeah.
maybe recap just a little bit or reflect what I'm hearing and make
Yeah.
sure that um, what we're saying is clear for the listeners.
Yes,
I think
please.
essentially what I'm hearing is our kids are peer attached.
Many of
It's
them are. Yeah.
I'm going to bring up that visual we've used before. Our care is meant to come from this overflowing place that we
Mhm.
are good. And so um, our capacity for care overflows toward the child. But
Yeah.
often that child's cup, right, the what
Hmm.
would be receiving the care is turned away from us.
Correct.
And
They're seeking it
so
somewhere else.
they're
Yep.
seeking it somewhere else. Neufeld calls that a peer orientation, or we're talking about competing attachments here.
Mhm.
But also in that parent-child dynamic, because of our own insecurity and narratives about ourselves as parents in the world,
Mhm.
sometimes that orientation is reversed
Mhm.
and the child is in alpha mode.
Yeah.
And when the child is in alpha mode, they are also in a state of alarm because that is
Yes.
not their,
Natural,
yeah,
relational.
yes. Okay.
Yeah. When they're in, yeah. I think when they're in an alpha mode vis-a-vis their peers, definitely. But
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I think I kind of jumped around different topics. So thank you for, reflecting back when it is that when our relational dynamic as a mother and a child or a father and a child, grandparents and a child, whoever those, primary caregivers are as adults, um, when that dynamic is flipped and they don't feel safe and secure with us,
Mm-hmm.
they don't feel safe to depend on us,
Right.
and their brains will just instinctually shift them into that alpha position.
Which
And if we
looks a
think
lot like this behavior.
it can, yes, I think when we think about this idea that our children are being disrespectful to us,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think it could be rooted in a lot of different places, but the
Yes.
two that really jump out to me are frustration,
Mm-hmm.
because that is aggression. That's that attacking energy.
Yes.
And the
Yes.
frustration happens when something is not working.
Right.
And that thing that's not working could be their relationship to us. Could
Right.
be. And so if that, so that's one possibility. It could also be their peer relationships. It could be so many other things in life that aren't
Yes.
working. There's things that aren't
Yes.
working all the time.
Yes. Yes. And we're going to get it as,
For sure. Because we're so here's another kind of maybe contradictory statement. If we are their safe place,
yes. I've said this many
of
times.
course they're going
Yes.
to
Yes.
be aggressive towards us. Of course they're going to just let their steam blow off towards us. So it's hard, there's so many different possibilities in any given
Yeah.
scenario. But the
I've
other
often
one that,
said,
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead, go ahead.
like that is often a sign that you are the safest person in their life
Correct.
when you're the one they're treating that way.
Yeah,
Yes. Because they know you're not going anywhere.
right,
And that's where they can let that out.
right.
Again, it's not conscious,
Not conscious at all.
but that's where that can happen for them because it does have
Mhm.
to come out. That's their way out of that frustration
Yes.
experience is through that aggression and that attacking energy.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So another possibility, I guess, is what I
Mm-hmm.
want to say, if a child is being disrespectful or, calling you names, being bossy,
Mm-hmm.
another possibility is that they're also an alpha. So each
Yes.
scenario is going to be different. Um, but these are the different things when we talk about what do you see?
Yes.
Is this
Which will help us
frustration?
determine what to do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is
Or
this
will
frustration?
determine for us what we do unconsciously.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to observe those dynamics when they're
Yeah.
happening, what we are seeing as disrespect, or is this attacking energy that could be coming from frustration, something that's not working for the child?
Mm-hmm.
If that's the case, what are the things that might not be working? And or is it also that the child is an alpha, and therefore what is the relational dynamic between me and my child? Am I seeking from my child? Am
Yes.
I sort of playing into that relational uh, dynamic that's off, where
Mm-hmm.
they're in charge, they're in the lead, and I'm desperately at times seeking from
Mm-hmm.
them?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
if that's also a factor, that's super important to see
Yes.
and to understand in order to try to address it, to fix that relational issue.
We want to be the place where they can be at rest.
Right.
And they can't be at rest if we are not in alpha mode, if we're in seeker mode.
Yep. 100%.
Okay. So maybe we tackle one of those
Yeah. Oof.
and then tackle the other one.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm almost wondering if there's something that works in both situations
Mm.
as
Mm-hmm.
far as maybe understanding what's happening. You use getting in front of it, but what's coming to my mind right now is kind of checking your assumptions,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
which will require the capacity to recognize what's happening and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, kind of bring that pause and consciousness to the moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think this is maybe different than the getting in front of it, which is
Mm.
what this has come up in a previous episode, and it was
Mm-hmm.
funny because I was listening and laughing at what I think went right over my head in that episode. Because I think this is a little bit of the opposite of getting in front of it, what I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna or what I have suggested at times. And what I think can also be a real alpha stance
Mm.
is gosh, I'm wondering if I'm jumping ahead with all this. If when you are experiencing this attacking energy and you're
Mm-hmm.
starting to feel defensive and wanting to explain yourself
Mm-hmm.
to your kid, which I think is often what happens, when they start going into this attack mode and and it triggers that, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to me, like this if it penetrates, right? If those barbs penetrate us and we feel the need to explain ourselves to our kids, we have reversed the roles. We have
Mm.
reversed the attachment. I think that is
Mm-hmm.
seeker mode when we feel the need to
Mm-hmm.
explain. If I'm
Mm.
going to think of this in Neufeld language,
Mm-hmm.
I tend to word it a little differently. Like, what is this bringing alive in you? You know,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I encourage clients to notice that defensiveness.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Okay, and sometimes it's going to take lots of practice to get there. Usually, we notice it later, right? It's like, oh, it was one of
Mm-hmm.
those times
Mm-hmm.
again. You know what I mean? But you can still
Yeah.
practice it in your head,
Mm-hmm.
to pause, remind yourself this isn't personal.
Yes.
If you can do that and stay sort of grounded in those alpha vibes,
Mm-hmm.
one thing you can do is
Mm-hmm.
just check that assumption of, you know what? This is how I'm experiencing your behavior right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this what you're intending? And if so, can
Yeah.
you help me
Yeah.
understand why you're treating me this way?
Yeah.
Right? Rather than trying to explain yourself.
Right.
Like check your assumptions because, like you said, they're teenagers. There's
Mm.
all kinds of things that aren't working for them, and even young adults, so they're going to be in this
Yeah.
frustration mode. They're going to take it out on us,
Yep.
and so that's another thing if you can pull into your mind at the moment, oh, that's right, I'm the safest person in their world, right?
Yeah.
So, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you allow the treatment
Right.
without doing something because
Right.
otherwise they're going to keep at it, right?
Yes.
And so what would you do with somebody else in your life,
Yeah.
who was treating
Yeah.
you this way?
Right.
You'd
Right.
say something,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And funnily enough, like sometimes we are perceiving it as more intense than maybe it is, and so that is something else to check as well, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yes.
and frankly, this is where coaching can be helpful because as we have brought up, what we see will determine what we do. And if we are in this sort of fragile state, or having a hard time getting grounded in those alpha vibes, there could be more going on there, right? That you need support with.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
But if you can bring yourself to do this, to check your assumptions and give them
Yeah.
an opportunity, to explain what's going on for them,
Yeah.
it's often very different than what we think it is, than the story that we're playing in our mind,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. This is so interesting. Maybe this is also a bit of a jump, but in some of our recent conversations, I keep thinking about, ooh, we have to do an episode on the Neufeld model of emotional development.
Mm,
One of the things,
hmm.
because that has been another, just a huge contribution I feel like he is making and has made to my understanding and so many people's understanding about, um, yeah, emotional development, how, and one of the first stages, which I think, he talks about it as like a young child who's very immature, but I think it can apply to teenagers,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is just this idea of naming, that immature, whether it's a 4-year-old or an 18-year-old, 16-year-old, if we haven't made it through this process of development and maturation and integration of like mixed feelings,
Yes.
we can't reflect. We
Right.
actually can't self-reflect on emotion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so one of those first stages that a role that a parent can play is just say, "Hey, I see you're frustrated."
Yes.
So what just came to me was like another way of like, I don't know if this fits into the checking assumptions idea, but for the parent to say, wow, I can see something is really not working for you.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm
Yep.
feeling a
And
lot of
that,
attacking energy here. And so,
yes.
wow, something
Yes.
is going not working for you. And I feel for you, but you can't talk to me that way. And, you know, I'm here to support you, you know,
Yeah.
later on when you're ready to, you know,
Sure. Yeah. And I've
I
used that
just,
one or something
yeah.
similar. I'm careful about, I think, saying you can't talk to me that way
Okay,
because
sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
clearly they can,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
coming out of their
Yeah.
mouth, right? And so,
Yes. One of the things,
yeah.
and that touches upon another thing that jumped out to me as you were talking,
Hmm.
is this idea of the alpha. And when Neufeld talks about these ideas of like making sense of quote unquote discipline and things like that,
Hmm.
the reality is the only power we have is attachment power.
Hmm. Yes.
We don't have anything else.
Yes. Oh my
And so
goodness.
he
Yes.
always talks about, don't let your impotence be shown, in the sense that like,
Yes.
yeah, so it's like, well, what are you going to do to me? You can't you're so
Exactly.
right. If you can't talk to me that way, yeah, I can. Yeah.
Yes.
you know there we
Right.
really
Because then if you then all you've got, right? I would say there is more than attachment power. There's coercion. But as we've
leverage, yeah.
discussed before, that's
Hmm.
wounding,
Yep.
and that is going to push the child further away.
Yep.
And
Yep. So
so,
you're right, thank you for saying something. So just keep the, hey, wow, I can really tell something's not working for you. I see you're
well, and
super
I think,
frustrated. Yeah.
yeah, and it is, I do think it comes down to that energy and whether it penetrates.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, it's so hard.
It
Yeah, it
is.
totally makes sense to
It's
me.
so
Yeah.
hard. And that is where I think mom's work needs to happen, is
Yes.
being grounded
Yes.
enough in this understanding and in your own um, sense of self,
Yes.
that when that if it does penetrate and you notice it, you recover from that so
Mm-hmm.
that you can then take on those alpha vibes again,
Yep.
which is going to be like, like they'll sense it. If it's not penetrating,
Oh, totally.
it stops working for them too,
I
right?
agree.
And
Mm-hmm.
so,
Mm-hmm.
to take
Mm-hmm.
that sort of alpha stance of, this is what I'm experiencing right now.
Yeah.
You know, can you help me understand why you're treating me this way?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And usually you'll learn something surprising often.
Mm-hmm.
It can be surprising, but might give you something to work with to care for the child, right? It
Yeah.
might
And
give
I
you
like,
something you can do to support them
yes.
and keep you in that alpha stance rather than
Right.
you needing them to change their behavior so you can feel better. You don't need
Yes.
them to change their behavior so
No.
you can feel better. You need them to
Right.
change their behavior because um, because they need to soften to your care.
Yeah. Or maybe it's not even like we need them to change their behavior. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, something is not working for my child.
Yes, it comes down to making sense of the behavior
Yeah.
rather than changing the
And
behavior. Like,
supporting
let's make
them.
sense of this. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because if they're in that attacking mode and if they're in alpha,
Hmm.
we got work to do.
Yes. Yes. And notice it's not about asking them what they need,
No, right. Totally.
right?
Because that's the self-reflection. A lot of
Yeah,
them can't do it yet.
right. And
And
so
it
we're
also puts us
stepping
into
in.
seeking.
Yes, exactly. Right. And so it is stepping in as somebody who has the capacity and the wisdom to
Mm-hmm.
help them with whatever it is that is
Yeah.
frustrating them.
Right. Right. And I like how you say like, why? Hey, you're yelling at me. I hear you calling me names. So I'm curious why you're treating me this way. That has a different energy to it than like, why are you treating me this way?
Yeah,
So
right.
the words are similar,
Hmm.
but I think what you're getting at is this kind of like, hey, kind of like that detachment that you talk
Yes.
about, where it's like you're saying in that warm provider, but you're also like a firm in that you have a boundary. You aren't letting those barbs penetrate enough so that you can just say, hey, you kind of call them on it,
Yes.
kind of call them on it, but like from an open and curious stance of like, okay, what's going on for you? I can see you got some
Something's not
stuff.
working. Yeah.
Yeah, you got some
Something's not
stuff
working
right
for you.
now. So let's talk about
Hmm.
it if you want
Hmm.
to.
Hmm. Right. Yes. I can offer you support in what
Yeah.
is not working for you, but I might
Mm-hmm.
need a little more information.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And also realizing that they might not even be aware, you
That's
know.
right.
And that's where we come in and saying like, wow, you're super frustrated. I can tell something not working, and maybe you don't even know what it is, but I can tell,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. And it can take a little while too, when you're in these conversations to get there because
Mhm.
often, like you said, they don't even know, and so
Yeah,
this does take some skill to be able
totally.
to stay present, and
Yeah.
not get defensive,
Mm-hmm.
but I started just using that as a cue. Oh, it's happening. Like I find myself wanting to explain. And what I initially did was just reflect. It was all I had.
Yeah,
Like,
good.
okay,
That's
all I got right
amazing.
now is reflect. I can just repeat
Yeah.
what she's saying,
Yeah.
and this can be really hard
Mm-hmm.
because often what they're saying is something really vicious about us,
Yeah, totally.
and so
Totally.
I would just say, oh, okay, you're experiencing me as this,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay.
and
Yep.
if you can do that
Mm-hmm.
un, from a not in a heightened emotional state, right?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just that reflection. You're just saying it back to them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is what's
Mm-hmm.
going on for you right now. You're
Mm-hmm.
experiencing this. You know what I mean? Then they feel
Yeah.
seen, you
Yeah.
know. Um, and I think that's more containing for them. It feels safer
Yeah.
because if mom has to explain, it's like you said, that's given
Yeah.
off that seeker vibe.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yep. There's some negotiation in that. There's
Hmm.
some desperation. There's some
Hmm. I need you to
grasping.
understand me.
Yeah, yes. Yep. Yep.
I
Yep.
need
Yep.
you to
Yep. Yep.
see me. I need you to understand
Yes.
why I do things the way I do, which we
Ye-
they we don't need that from them
No. No.
because we're grounded in what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's really well said.
Okay. Um, so that's when they're in frustration, which
Yeah.
I mean, There's some primal emotion going on if they're treating us
Yeah.
this way. Is that right? I
Toad.
mean, okay.
Yeah,
Or is
or
it just could it be
defenses
in
kicked in around it,
yes.
you
Because this could be
know.
an established dynamic.
Totally. Totally. Yep. So sometimes we can't necessarily even see some of those signs of alarm
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
pursuit, or in
Mm-hmm.
this case, maybe we do see the attacking energy, so we can tell there's frustration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, but when these dynamics are really locked in,
Mm-hmm.
it can get more complex. And that's when the defenses show up. And then it can get harder to actually see what's going
Yeah.
on for some of these kids. But if we see,
Or for
um,
ourselves.
yes, 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 yes. But if we see that their hearts are hardened,
Yeah.
if we find ourselves kind of being so put off by our child, and again, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
use that word that it
Yeah.
comes from what Neufeld said, the odious behavior, where our attachment is going in reverse.
Yes.
That to me, that I want to give this as an insight to listeners. If you find your attachments going in reverse, it's pretty likely that your child is defended.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's like their hearts are not soft towards you, and therefore they are acting in a way that is so off-putting. But it takes a stretching
Mm-hmm.
in our own
Mm-hmm.
reaction
Oh, yeah.
to
Stretching,
say, oh,
expanding.
yeah, oh, I am feeling like I can't stand my own child.
Yeah. Yeah.
That means their defenses are up. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where they're acting out of. They're acting like they don't care. Nothing is working. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they've got defenses up. And it takes so much for us to be bigger than that.
We have to soften.
Yeah.
And that's maybe um that might sound a little confusing when we're talking also about being the alpha and not allowing these things to penetrate.
Yeah.
But that energy in the dynamic is so incredibly important. And
Yeah.
if we are not soft, they cannot soften.
Right.
They cannot.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
If
like the
we,
sun and the north wind. Those
exactly.
defenses are on. So we're going to blow that cold air and try to just tear the defenses off. No, they will get harder and harder and harder and harder.
Mhm. Well, and I think too, if they're defended,
Yeah.
I think we really need to see that as a reflection. We must be defended also.
Hmm. I think each case can be so different. It if their cups aren't tilted towards us, you know, um, and maybe it's from past wounding, maybe we have, used coercion or, kind of not always been the safe to depend upon in the past. That's possible. That's totally possible.
It's
Um,
actually quite normal.
yeah,
I think I think
yeah,
this is the way our culture is structured.
yeah, I know.
And so it's mostly what we know.
The
It's what
norm.
we've got. And if you didn't have something else in your toolbox, you
Yep,
know,
yep,
or any understanding that there could be something different, of course
yeah.
that's what you've been doing. I mean,
Right. That's such a good way to put it. Yeah. It is the water we swim in. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Is the behaviorist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But-
Yeah.
And so, and we've talked about this before, there's sort of different paradigms and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what it takes to shift that,
Yeah.
and essentially what we're saying is the behaviorist approach
Is wounding.
is wounding.
Totally.
And
Yep.
so if that is what you've been doing and you would like to change the relationship, it is important to look at that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. For sure. Yeah. Yep.
And that is hard to do if you are defended.
Oh, for sure.
It might be impossible,
Yep. Yep.
And so then you've got to
Yep.
really, I think, get clear on your own values and what's most important to you.
Yeah.
And if this relationship, if you want a healthy relationship with your children,
Yeah.
to explore what it would take to shift uh, to something new.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. And this just jumped out to me in this, past few seconds. Along this whole conversation of, you know, wanting our children to respect us. What do we do if we feel that they're disrespecting us? Everything we're talking about right now. Another pervasive cultural dynamic that I think pretty much anybody growing up in this culture has absorbed is this idea of teaching a lesson.
Mhm. Oh, I'm so glad this is coming up. This has been this is timely for sure. Some recent interviews with other moms and right, the seizing the teachable moment. And sorry, I should let you finish and then I'll explain why I think this is so timely.
Oh, yeah. No, just I think it goes along with everything we're talking about. And it's something that I have found myself, it's like in these moments over the years of, that I have almost this conscious, like, here it comes and letting go of it.
Yes. Oh, yes. Okay, so let's clarify what we're saying here
Okay.
about teaching a lesson. So
Yeah.
basically, it's rather than seizing the teachable moment, letting go of that. Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying? Okay.
It's not about teaching a lesson.
Yeah.
It's about relationship.
And this is gonna challenge a lot of people.
Huge challenge.
And okay, and I'm still wanting to jump ahead, but I'm
Jump in.
wondering
Oh
if,
gosh, jump in.
well,
I can't wait for you to jump in. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if we need a more sort of basic example before I go into what I see as creating so much confusion and difficulty in parent and adult child relationships, or even parent and late adolescent relationships, when it comes to um, thinking that we can argue. And I don't mean as in like conflict, but as in like logic, our kids out of a trans identity or wanting to medicalize. And so we collect tons and tons of evidence-based research that we are going to show them and convince them that this is not right for them.
Yeah.
And that even that, when I'm going to go there with that word, is wounding.
Hmm. Hmm. Wow.
And that's hard to wrap your head around, and the reason and I'm speaking from experience here in my own
Yeah.
relationship with my child, in seeing what would happen, and not even around that. I kind of given up on that already, but I would still
Mm-hmm.
try to seize those teachable moments, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And she
Mm.
would, and it would be in a moment of connection when she was sharing something with me, that it, she was enjoying, but it was something that I could see maybe wasn't the worldview I'd like her to have, and I was maybe
Yeah.
like just trying to use my questions to get her to see it another way. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
and this would be after months of building goodwill and not seizing any teachable moments.
Yeah.
And she was on to me,
Yeah.
and it was so obvious and literal the distance that it would create,
Wow.
right? It was like I just crushed her by trying to seize a teachable moment instead of just allowing the connection.
Wow.
Yeah, it was fascinating.
Wow.
But I think when it comes to the evidence too, like moms are trying to build all this goodwill so that they can then get their kid to listen to them and see what they want to show them.
Yeah. It's so tricky.
Hmm. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, it's so tricky because of course that's what they should be doing. You know, in a sense,
Yeah.
it's like they should absolutely be building goodwill, building,
Yes.
working the relationship. But if the child or the adult child then sees, oh, you were doing all this to then do that,
Hmm. Hmm.
we have to be doing that goodwill without any expectation of an outcome.
Hmm. Non-attachment. Hmm.
Yeah, which is yeah, I can't even imagine how difficult that must be.
So hard because that's moms are just they're trying to save their child
Of
from.
course, you're trying to save your child.
Hmm. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. But would you say, can I jump in here?
Hmm.
But it doesn't mean to never have those conversations, right?
Oh, I agree. I
It just,
agree.
it's
I,
just about not taking advantage of the vulnerability, like almost exploiting those moments of softness or how, like, how would you pull that apart in
yeah,
terms of when, because parents should be able to
I think
say
it's
how they
important.
feel and their
Absolutely.
concerns
Yes.
and but like how do you differentiate between when it's going to cause that palpable distance when a child is finally leaning in to depending
Hmm.
it for you is in that example with your daughter, like is that about that she is like she's leaning into dependence on you because she's sharing her inner world, she's opening up, and then it's
Mm-hmm.
like you share this piece that's about, please don't be trans anymore and here's why, or did you ever think about it this way, or um and then that shuts her down. Like was that the dynamic you witnessed
I'm
versus
thinking of a
you?
specific situation where she was
Yeah,
showing me it was some content. It was always content,
yeah.
something off of YouTube or whatever,
Totally.
and
Oh gosh, yeah.
it was uh essentially I ended up bringing up the name, and I can't even remember the name now, the lady that did the documentary around J.K. Rowling. Um, and I just brought up the name and I watched the name sink in. And as soon and it did. She knew who I was
Mm,
talking about. I was hoping to bring her up in a different context. I think it was about her growing
mm.
up in a cult or something like that. I can't even
Oh, was
remember
it Megan
exactly.
Phelps Roper? That
Yes.
one? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Hmm.
So it was the name. And
Hmm.
literally the name sunk in. I watched it sink in. And she said, I'm done. And she got up and walked away after like an hour and a half of us connecting over this content.
Wow.
Hmm. Hmm. Now, and I can't remember if you and I have talked about this on the program. I took a very, very different approach eventually. You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
I stopped trying to, I gave up on trying to get her to desist,
Yeah.
right? Because that seemed wounding.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and I decided to go with trust, essentially.
Mm.
And because what became most important to me was to be alongside her.
Yeah.
I want her to know I'm beside her. She
Yeah.
knows how I think about this. I had been very clear. She also
Yeah.
just knows my values.
Yeah.
She knew that from the start. She knew getting me on board with medicalization was not likely to happen
Mm-hmm.
just because of who I had been up until that point, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, and so it was not a surprise to her to discover that I don't think that body modification is the way to authenticity,
Yeah.
right? So she's very
Yeah.
clear on this, and I had very clearly stated, we would not no medicalization was going to happen while she was in our home, and we would encourage her to wait till at least 25 when her prefrontal cortex was more fully developed, and there just was not enough research to support um,
Mm-hmm.
this approach from
Mm-hmm.
my perspective, from
Mm-hmm.
what I have
Mm-hmm.
discovered. And so I just put the boundary in,
Boom.
in a
Yeah.
very, you know,
Mm-hmm.
um, grounded way,
Matter of
right?
fact. Yep.
Yes. And she
Mm-hmm.
and she let it go, right? I think it,
Mm-hmm.
it did provide
Mm-hmm.
that rest. Oh, I can stop. There's no point in even festering about
Yes.
this. It's not happening,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
just knew. She knew that that was not budging at all. Now, as she approached 18, um, I got very clear on what was most important to me.
Yeah.
And that was that she get the best possible care.
Yeah.
And the way to come alongside her was to find that shared goal of
Mm.
the healthiest possible outcome.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Knowing that once she was 18, I don't get to decide that,
No. Yep.
but we could share that. We could have that in common. We both want the best possible outcomes for you.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure you have the best possible care.
Yeah.
Should you take steps toward medicalization, please come to me.
Mm.
I want to contribute
Mm-hmm.
and make
Mm-hmm.
sure you get the best possible care.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and that put her in a little bit of a pickle.
Yeah.
You know, she I did I think at one point say, I would like you to share with
Mm-hmm.
me what has you convinced that this is going to be the safest, healthiest approach for you.
Mm.
And she
Mm-hmm.
and she said, well, you're going to just show me the conflicting research, basically. I said, no, I don't plan to show you
Mm.
anything. And I meant it.
Yeah. Wow.
And she's never done that.
She's never done.
She's never brought me anything.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
She's never approached the conversation, you know. That was the
Mm-hmm.
last time was when I said that to her.
Wow. And how long ago was that?
It was a couple years ago, around
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And she's
Mm-hmm.
20 now. hmm
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that was another one of those sort of long conversations where I could see her grappling with the narrative
Mm-hmm.
that the culture is telling her about parents like me,
Yeah.
and working so hard to kind of map it on to what was happening that was not
Yes.
supporting that narrative in any way.
Yeah.
Where if I had taken the opposite stand and tried to argue her out of it,
Yeah.
I just support the story.
Wow. 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 Wow.
And I grapple a lot with the unique situations and the unique dynamics, and I
Yeah.
everybody knows their kid best.
Yeah.
And there are these sort of just human dynamics at play,
Yeah. Yeah.
psychology at play here,
Yeah.
that if we have enough understanding around that and enough faith,
Yeah.
I think that's what it comes down to. You and I have talked about that
Mm-hmm.
faith in the blueprint, and that maybe this is somewhat embedded in the blueprint, those dynamics, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yes. It's so interesting to me because as I listen to you, I think what comes up just on a personal level is how different my story is from the parents who have the ROGD, kids, the adolescents, teenagers, young adults. It just feels like such a totally different story because in my case, my situation was very different because I
uh-huh.
had sort of led my son into a cross
Mm,
sex identification, and I
right.
came to see all the different attachment and dynamics and defenses that were, underneath maintaining it and locking it in. But I actually had to, lay out that futility for him. He was an
Mm-hmm.
8-year old.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a totally different story. And so I think as you talk, and it makes so much sense to me, it just, you know, I'm like really holding space for how different this can be depending on the scenario, depending on the parent's role, you know, and kind of where the trans or the cross-sex identity came out of, um, while also, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I didn't mean to interrupt your thought. I'm
No,
so sorry. Um,
no, 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 go ahead.
I'm coming back to what you said about attachment being the power we have.
Yes. Yes.
And and I think that's what I came to maybe. That is what I came
Yeah.
to. I would say
Yeah.
maybe not
I agree. I
consciously, but it was.
totally
It
agree.
absolutely
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
right? Like that's
Yep.
what was guiding my choice to come at it
Yes.
in this way.
Yes.
And
Yep.
I did have to make peace with she might take me up on this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's why that clarity around best possible care helped me.
Yeah.
I do want that.
Oh, for
If
sure.
she's going to do this,
Yep.
I want her to have the best possible care. And I
Yeah.
want her to know how important that is to me, that it's
Yeah.
important enough that I will contribute to it.
Wow. Yeah.
And I know that that is a hard, maybe feels impossible approach to take
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
some families. And I can't, it comes down to paradigms again,
Mm-hmm.
I think,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know, and I completely understand the families that cannot do that,
Yeah.
for whom it is more important to keep their child's body intact
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
than to keep the relationship intact.
Mm-hmm. Right. But wouldn't you say it is the case that at the end of the day, we can't keep our children's bodies intact after they turn 18?
Yeah. And that's why,
I mean,
yeah,
and so it gets back to that attachment power where it's like,
yes,
that's all we have,
yeah, yeah.
no matter what choices our child makes.
And
That,
if we want to have influence, it's interesting.
mm-hmm,
My influence now is just her deep awareness of my values
mm-hmm,
and that I'm
mm-hmm.
not going anywhere, that I'm
Yeah,
going to support her regardless.
yeah, which is huge. It's so huge.
Yeah. And I think in some ways that keeps her safe.
Yeah,
She can still use me
mm-hmm,
as, and I don't know if she does,
yeah,
but if it comes up in her friend group or anything, does maybe she uses her family as her reasoning, and that's fine
yeah,
by me. You know what I
yeah,
mean? If she, even if she talks about us with contempt or whatever, as
Mhm. Mhm.
those parents. I don't
Mhm.
think she does. I don't get that sense,
Mm-mm.
but even if
Mhm.
she did, I'd be okay with that, right? Like
Right.
that's okay.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
Um, I have certainly witnessed in my work the families, and I think that clarity is important. Like I just
Mhm.
cannot
Mhm.
tolerate watching my child do this
Yeah.
to themselves,
Yeah.
you know. And
Yeah.
and I again I get it. And I can say I've made peace with that, but I haven't had to deal
Mhm.
with it yet, you know. And
Right.
so like
Right.
I want to acknowledge that.
Right.
Yeah, of course. Of course it would throw me into all kinds of emotions. I know that.
Yeah.
I do think that clarity, it I think that's what I was talking about was the clarity of values, you
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
and that parents are being forced to do this
Yeah.
to get really clear. And maybe they're not doing that part,
Yeah.
I think that's possible,
Doing what part?
the clarity,
Okay.
so that they have a real awareness of the the consequences
Mm.
of their their choices, I
Mm.
guess. Like the taking a stand,
Mm.
you know, um, maybe feeling like it's the best thing they can do for their family. But I guess that depends on, is the best thing for your family to be together,
Mhm.
or is the
Mhm.
best thing for your
Mhm.
family for you to be really clear on your position and not?
Yeah.
I know I'm just opening Pandora's box, and this is
No, I mean, I think where I was going a little earlier was just I feel like I was feeling just this immense amount of either like potential space for the nuances of
mhm.
the warmth of that generous invitation, prioritizing the relationship. And then how do you weave in your perspective, your concerns,
I think you do it with respect.
your stand, not like taking a stand, but where you are at, what you think, what you feel, but without exploiting the
Yes.
vulnerability or exploiting the dependence. When you actually achieve that goodwill, when you actually achieve that opening up or that softness, to not then turn it around and kind of, I don't know if this is the right word or not, but like exploit it to your own agenda.
Yes. I
um
love
that
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 question. I
that
think
that
that's
might that
mhm.
be what kicks those defenses right back in,
Mhm. Mhm.
versus
Mhm.
just in those special moments, letting those special moments stay special,
Yeah.
without the agenda.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that gives you fertile ground at some other moment to have an in to share a piece of your perspective or ask a question. I don't know if that makes sense or not. Like just that kind of delicate balance of, when am I asserting my will or my agenda? And we've said this so many episodes before. You might do this. You just told a story about how you did that
Mhm.
and the distance that it created. But look at all of everything else you've done. So it's also to be forgiving of ourselves
Oh,
if we've
yes.
done this, if we do it in
Yes.
the future, and
Yes.
just paying attention. Like you're saying, oh, I had that goodwill, I had built it up, and then I tried to kind of Did that work or did it not work?
I
And
love that.
and what it
Yes.
brings me back to is this newfound concept of walking the maze. And that
Yes.
is exactly what we have to do. We
Yes.
have to see, oh shit, I just hit a wall,
Yes. Yes.
but it's not over.
Right.
I'm going to
Right.
go to bed and I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm going to turn in a different direction. I'm going to try
Mm-hmm.
something different. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to try to learn from that, reflect upon it, be like, huh, so this is what was happening. And then this happened. And then something went the other way.
Mm-hmm.
That's so what am I going to do the next time? How can I repair if there's repair to be done? And maybe it's not a direct, addressing of what happened, or maybe it is, but it's like going back to the drawing board. Like we're going to wake
Yeah.
up again and we're still going to yearn for closeness with our child. We're still going to yearn for their best interests. And we're still going to have to grieve, and maybe even more so, the futility of what we cannot
Mm-hmm.
change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And like you've said so many times, it is, through hitting that wall,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps, of that futility that our hearts are softened again, in general, but also in the way that we approach our child, um,
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, I'm not going to change. I It's not within my power.
When you say you mean I'm not going to change what? Can you
My
finish that
child's
sentence?
ultimate decision
Yeah.
as an adult
Yeah.
to medicalize.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you like stop caring,
Right.
or that you are kind of not fulfilling your responsibilities or anything like that. It's not that you give up. It's like, I want to say it's not that you give up, but it's just that your
I think
focus
it's
is shifting.
yeah, it's what I think you
I don't know if that makes sense or not.
yeah, I want to look at that term give up and talk about maybe there is some giving up,
Oh
but
yeah, I guess it has to be. If you're hitting
yeah,
futility,
right.
you kind of got to give
Right.
up.
But being clear on what you're giving up,
Yeah,
and I
right.
think that's what happens is
There
a
you
lot of
go.
parents who give up on persuasion
Mm,
feel like they're giving up on their child.
yeah, no, you're not giving up on your child. You can't give up on your child. You're
Right.
still their best bet. You
You're
just
still
can't
their best bet.
change
That's
the
right.
outcome.
Now, right. And yeah, the story we have around medicalization too, I think, is dangerous. Yes, I
Yeah.
understand that this is permanent changes
Mm-hmm.
and it's
Mm-hmm.
not healthy for the body, and
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
I do think we've got to be careful about holding that story that they've ruined their lives.
Oh, I know.
Um,
I know.
and that I mean, there's always redemption. I think is an important story to
100%.
hold, and there's always the
Yes.
possibility for a good life. There's that
Always.
doesn't go away.
Mm-hmm.
You can always choose something different, even if you have made permanent changes to your body.
Yeah. Yeah. And if, you know, I think about it this way, because you have to, believe me when I say I've thought about this so much over the years, because, there's, and I've said this in past episodes, there's no way that I can tell the future for my own sons.
Right. Right.
I can hope, but I don't know what the future has for them at 18, at 30, at 45. I don't know.
Right.
And so, it's kind of getting me out of the sheer cold ice force of my alarm, in
Mm,
that initial period after kind of coming out of this belief system and having to help my son out of it and all of these things, was like, I was gripped by alarm and fearing for what could happen in the future. And I think as I've worked my way out of that, it's having to accept that if for any reason my own children would go on and become trans-identified as older, in their adult lives, um, and medicalized, it's like if they were to go down that path at some point in their own futures, they may, regret it, or they may, you know, and there's going to be so much futility to face in that for
Yes.
them.
Yes.
So how for me to be able to be there for that,
Yep. Yep. That was another that that drove my behavior too, is that recognition right there.
right? I have to be able to face my own
Mm-hmm.
to be able to then maybe someday hold them in theirs. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
true no matter what, trans identification or not.
I agree.
We are priming ourselves
Mm-hmm.
over the long term to be able to show up for our children as they experience tragedy, as they
Yes.
experience things not working in their own lives.
Yes.
Um,
I think this is a paradigm shift as well around what it means to be alive and what life is all about, and we have become so uh, comfort oriented,
yeah,
that life has become about avoiding tragedy and discomfort at all costs,
yeah,
you know, to the cost of like even fully living, and trying to shield our children
yeah,
from pain,
yeah,
which yes, we do. Of course we keep them as safe as we can. The
right.
best safety we can provide for them is emotional safety
Yeah.
and forever support,
Hmm.
because they will encounter tragedy.
Oh, for
There
sure.
will be suffering. There will be pain. It wouldn't be life without it.
Yep.
So having somebody in with the wisdom and adaptability and capacity to help them when they are experiencing that tragedy and pain,
Yeah.
you know, if you see that as your role, you know, then
Yes.
that changes the way you do things. We're back to
Yes.
that. What you see determines what you do.
Yes.
And so paying
Yes.
attention to what you see is so very important.
Yes.
Do you
Yes. And
see disrespect or do you see frustration?
yeah. Yep. Do
You
you see
know?
disrespect, or do you see your child potentially in pure orientation
Mm-hmm.
and or in, an alpha, stuck in alpha vis-a-vis you? All of those things are going to call us into doing something very different than just seeing it as disrespect.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like seeing it as being mean. You're being mean. It's putting this extra layer of value, of charge,
Yes.
of onto something that underneath it, could be more simple, more basic, and more understandable.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of where
Mm-hmm.
it's coming from.
And that will keep you in a soft enough place that your child can
Right.
soften.
Yeah. I don't know why I want to tell this story, but maybe it's one way we could end. We think about the tragedy, what we're just speaking to. And well, first, I just want to say this before I tell the story. I love how you put that just right before this, that what if we saw this as our role? Because it
Mm.
does bring the conversation kind of full circle of talking about what we said at the beginning, where it was like, we've become too role based in the sense that it's say, if I am your mother, then this should be
Mm-hmm.
automatic.
Mm-hmm.
This is how you
Mm-hmm.
should treat me, da da da. Um, versus, wow, we have to stretch as mothers,
Mm-hmm.
as fathers, as parents. Our role is to stretch, to be big
Mm-hmm.
enough to
Mm-hmm.
come alongside the tragedies our child may experience in life.
Yes.
You know, that,
Yep.
it's using that same word role, but coming at it from, a richer perspective that shifts us into that understanding of, you know, what is the care that I am taking to cultivate this relationship with my child.
And I just want to say one more thing. I think that requires you looking at your own defenses
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
and determining what is necessary for you to melt those so
Yeah,
you can be available
I agree.
to your child. Okay. Yeah.
So just real quick, the story that I don't, for whatever reason, it's coming up in this end of our conversation here is a few months back, must have been this in the spring. My younger son got really into the Luke Combs version of Tracy Chapman's Fast Car.
Mm, okay.
We're listening to like somehow we watched that video at whatever award ceremony it was where because there's all the drama. Oh, Luke Combs, this white country singer, is
Oh,
taking Tracy
I don't know about the
Chapman.
drama, but okay.
Okay. So then they,
Appropriation.
yeah, yeah. So then
So,
they
okay.
ended up playing it together
Oh,
and it was
nice.
this really beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
So so we started listening to the Luke Combs version on the drive to school. We were listening to the Tracy Chapman version. Like my son would like listen to it when he'd like go take a shower. He just wanted to blast it, on repeat. He was just got really into like I think
Mm,
just the emotion of the
mm-hmm.
song. And so one day we were driving to school and we were playing the Luke Combs. I can't remember which version, but I was singing along with it and I was getting teary-eyed, I was getting
Mm,
and my son says to me from the back seat, he says, "Mama, what is this song about?"
mm,
And I'm gonna cry just talking about it right now. Like I was like, I just, you know, at that moment in that period of time a few months ago, I was just like, I finally that song just landed so much deeper in
mm,
me. And I
mm-hmm.
don't know if I just listened to the lyrics more in the second part of the song, but it was like, you've done so much to escape, this position in life where are sacrificing and you're trying to improve, you're trying to make your life better, and then you end up again facing these futilities.
Mm,
Um, and I so I just said to him, it's a song about trying so hard,
mm,
to escape suffering, only to find that you're still going to experience it. You're still going to have these hard times. And I just remember feeling so tender and so, and just now the tears coming to my eyes. It's just, I don't know. It was just this beautiful moment of like sharing through this song, this kind of universal experience of being human.
mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's poignant. It's poignant because we all have these things that we try to run from,
Yep.
but they're still with us, those heartaches.
Well, you capture it right there, you know. Is that what is driving your life? Are you in the fast car driving away from the pain and the suffering and the hurt? Or can we use that? Can we use the information in that pain and suffering and hurt to do what you're talking about, the stretching, the
Yeah,
expanding? I do think there's so much gold in there for us if we stop
yeah,
running from it
yeah,
and embrace the universal human experience we're all having.
yeah.
We want to rescue our kids from the universal human experience, and it can't be done.
No.
And the paradox here is that we grow ourselves up
Hmm.
through this process,
Yeah,
and life becomes that much richer.
yeah. I couldn't agree more.
Mm. Thank you for listening. We hope you take something of value from our conversation today. Please check out the show notes for additional resources, including a prompt for reflection. We welcome your feedback in the comments and hope you join us for the next episode of Attachment Matters.